And we bring into the conversation now Robert O'Brien. He served as National Security Advisor in the Trump administration through the end of the former president's term, and he joins us this morning from Palm Springs, California. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Thank you. It's good to be back, Margaret.
I know when you were last with us, you said that you would be honored to serve with Mr. Trump again, and you laid out in this essay in Foreign Affairs what you think a second Trump term would look like. So I want to get to that. Recently, in some interviews, Mr. Trump has refused to say what he would do if China invaded Taiwan. I wonder if you would advise him to have U.S. military forces defend it.
Well, I think that's always been the policy of the American government. It's called strategic ambiguity, and we don't tell the Chinese how we're going to react to their actions. But the key thing, Margaret, is peace through strength. If we have a strong Navy, if we move our soldiers and Marines out of Europe and Germany where they're garrisoned and put them in Guam and Hawaii and the Philippines, Australia where we have Marines already, that sends a strong message to the Chinese not to invade. The key is to deter war, not to fight and win a war, which we need to do if it happens, but we need to deter the Chinese and the Communist Party from invading Taiwan in the first place, which we failed to do with Russia and Ukraine. And so strength will deter the Chinese from invading. Mm-hmm. It's not talk, it's how they see our force posture.
So, well, the largest contingent of all overseas U.S. military forces is in East Asia and the Pacific already. You're calling to send the entire Marine Corps to Asia. When Mr. Trump was president, sorry, go ahead.
The fighting force, the Marine Corps, we'll still have Pendleton and Camp Lejeune and the logistics tail, but like World War II, when Asia was key for us, we should have the Marines in Asia, we should have the Air Force and the Army and parts of the Navy in Europe and the rest of the world, but the Marines are perfectly suited for the Indo-Pacific, and we should have our fighting force there to deter the Chinese. We don't want a war, Margaret, we want to stop a war, and the way to stop a war is through strength. And moving the Marine Corps to the Pacific and moving a carrier battle group to the Pacific would show the kind of strength needed to deter a war.
Okay, so you're not moving all 170,000 Marines to Asia, but some of them.
No.
Okay,
Correct.
So when Mr. Trump was president, though, he publicly pressed multiple times for the U.S. to withdraw the 28,000 U.S. troops that are in our treaty ally, South Korea. He also threatened to pull out of Japan. And I wonder if you think that threatening to pull out of Asian allied countries like that shows daylight in a way that emboldens China.
No, what President Trump was trying to do, and he did this with NATO as well, is we need our allies to step up. America can't do this alone. The American taxpayer can't deter China alone. We need help from our allies. And President Trump, made sure that the South Koreans and the Japanese and our European allies paid their fair share and helped burden share with us. So part of the negotiations.
Well, they already were helping to pay for some of the costs related to housing those troops in their countries.
Some of the costs, but not enough. So the American taxpayers took a tremendous burden, and we've got a massive federal deficit. We've got inflation at home. We've got burdens here in America. So we need our allies to step up to the plate and participate in the same way we do. We pay almost 4% of our GDP for defense. South Korea is coming up higher. Japan is coming up higher. And it's a direct result of President Trump and his tough negotiations and his tough policy. So I look at what happened and not look at the negotiating rhetoric.
But at a time when you are looking at a more aggressive China, threatening to pull out U.S. troops would seem to backfire on your ultimate strategic intent.
Well, our strategic intent is to be as strong as possible in Asia, and we got there with Trump, and it'll go back again with President Trump when he returns in 6 months, because when the Japanese are engaged, when the South Koreans are engaged, when the Australians are engaged, and keep in mind all of these countries have raised their defense spending very significantly because of President Trump, and in Europe as well, and that didn't start under Biden, that started under President Trump.
Yep.
That makes us stronger against China. So sometimes you have to be tough. You have to show tough love to your allies, and just like with family members, you have to be, sometimes you have to be a little tough with your family members. But the Chinese aren't going to divide the family. They're not going to divide the allies. But we do need to make sure that the allies pay their fair share.
Well, what would Donald Trump do to divide the axis, the new alliance that we are really seeing grow between Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea? Vladimir Putin was just driving around North Korea with Kim Jong-un this past week.
Yeah, that's a great question, Margaret. And that alliance has gotten much stronger under the Biden administration because there's been a lack of American leadership. We haven't shown peace or strength. So the first thing we can do is increase our energy production in America. These countries are relying on Russian energy to run their economies. We need to increase our energy production. We need to sanction the Russian Federation Central Bank, which Larry Kudlow and I called upon the president to do before the invasion of Ukraine, and start cutting back on Russian oil sales. We need to put maximum pressure back on the Iranians, who are causing so much trouble all throughout the Middle East. And so those are some of the steps we can take, and then rebuild our military, rebuild our Navy, get our shipyards producing ships again. Those are the things that'll divide the alliance, this axis of evil.
It's getting harder to sanction when Russia is protecting some of those rogue states and China too. But on Russia, during the first Trump administration, the president then argued he was going to pull out at least 10,000 of the 35,000 U.S. troops stationed in U.S. ally Germany. You wrote an op-ed at the time arguing in defense of that and saying that keeping troops in Europe was an obsolete Cold War practice. Do you think, in hindsight, that helped embolden Vladimir Putin?
No, what we did with Vladimir Putin is we stopped the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That was his #1 foreign policy objective, was to get that pipeline built and develop energy dominance over Western Europe, and we stopped it. The first thing President Biden did when he came into office was he opened the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and canceled the Keystone XL pipeline to further diminish American energy production. But
the invasion of Ukraine ultimately killed that.
Well, it killed it because Biden opened the pipeline again, and Russia took that as a green light to invade Ukraine, along with our debacle in Afghanistan. But going to the troop question, what I said is it wasn't troops in Europe, Margaret, it was troops in Germany. Germany is no longer a frontline state, and we have too many troops garrisoned in Germany. And I said we need to move some of those troops to the front line, to Poland and the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And we need to move some of them to American territories in the Pacific, like Guam, Hawaii, the Aleutian Islands, and Alaska, to deter our adversaries. Just having garrison troops in Germany doesn't help us.
John Bolton and Mark Esper have a different account of what happened during that time, saying that you supported pulling out and bringing people back to the U.S. But on the campaign trail right now, Donald Trump is talking about Ukraine a lot. And he said, apparently, according to the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, that he won't give a penny to Ukraine if he's reelected. And by cutting off that money, that will end the war. That sounds like that would be ending the war in Russia's favor, doesn't it?
Well, keep in mind, Margaret, we're the first administration to give lethal aid to the Ukrainians. The Javelin missiles, which stopped the Russian invasion to start with. And I give the Biden administration credit for getting them some aid afterwards, but it was always too little too late. We need to bring Vladimir Putin to the table, and the way to do that is what Larry Kudlow and I called for and what President Trump has called for, is to put massive sanctions on the Russians to bring Putin to the table so we can have a negotiated peace treaty. We've got to stop the killing in Ukraine. We've got to stop the killing of Ukrainians. We've got to stop the killing of Russians. And we need peace in the world. And our weakness, this too little too late, telling the Ukrainians they can have some weapons, but they can't have others. They can use some weapons, but they can't use others. The half-measure sanctions, none of that's helping in the war in Ukraine. It's a lack of leadership under the Biden administration. Trump will get this war settled very quickly.